Hello and welcome to the virtual podcast. My name is Emily. I'm your host. Today I am joined by Lauren Kennedy and Brooke Marks, the dynamic duo behind High End, which is an app and a marketplace which is kind of redefining how we buy and sell luxury goods. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much. So actually my first question is for you, Brooke. So you found the original Facebook marketplace group, High End. How did that start and how did you decide this community needs to be utilised to actually get a business?
Interesting question. So I started it 10 years ago now, and it sort of started as a hobby because I realised there was no safe place to sell your designer goods. There was like eBay and sort of your bigger markets or consignment stores, but I actually got scammed on the resale market when I bought my first designer handbag. I spent $2,000. My parents said, "You're an idiot." So from that day onwards, I really wanted to learn everything I could about authentication and make a really safe community for people.
Right. So can you tell me about your scam experience? How did this happen?
Do we name names?
Please do.
It was on a huge marketplace, global marketplace, eBay. Still love eBay today. But I purchased a Celine Phoebe Philo bag and I thought it looked real. It looked great. Scams weren't really a big thing in the industry. It was really quite obvious to spot a fake. And this is when they started to get quite sophisticated. And when I received it, I realized I lost my money. I didn't get my money back. And from that day onwards, I really wanted to learn. And I sort of became an authenticator by trade after many years, also working in like luxury consignment and that sort of sector. So yeah, the Facebook group taught me everything I know to this day.
How did you vet actual products that were being sold on the Facebook group and ensure that they were authentic?
It was definitely a difficult process because I had to authenticate everything digitally because nothing actually came through our hands. And this is one reason why we decided to build the marketplace and get off Facebook so we own the data and we could change the processes. But in terms of authenticating digitally, we would look at certain areas of the product. So clothing is really simple. We look at sort of the Care brand label, the brand like at the back of your dress, on the side, and we look for like anomalies, I guess, text spacing, color, style numbers. There's like lots of pieces to the puzzle that you use to authenticate. But usually with clothing, it is just a few numbers or the font's off because you can compare it to the real thing. Handbags, however, and jewelry are definitely another discussion. For a handbag, you would look at serial codes, brand logos, the type of leather used or material, and they're a little bit more difficult to authenticate.
Right. And so I understand now you're using some AI technology in the app to authenticate these items. How does that work?
So that's when Brooke and I connected. I remember my friend added me to the Facebook group probably 6 or 7 years ago, and we connected. My background's in fraud data science. That's what I did every single day, bread and butter. And I couldn't tell you what was real or what was fake on the market, but there was so many counterfeits happening and scams. And that's when my friend added me to the Facebook group. And Brooke and I started having a conversation and I was asking her, how do you authenticate everything? You know, there's 100,000 people in here, which was 4,000 items every month being listed for sale.
Wow.
And I was just doing the math in my head. I'm like, how are you doing this every single day? And she was like, oh, I didn't know you could automate it. I was like, hey, we need to get a model in here. There's got to be some sort of solution. And that's when we decided to go into business together and raise capital and use the marketplace as our data source to essentially then build the AI models to be able to digitally automate that authentication process. So you can authenticate your mid-market items like your Zimmermann and your Alame without actually having to physically hold the product. So it's similar to, we always say it's putting Brooke's brain into a model, similar to what she was explaining. So we require certain images for the model to detect if it's counterfeit or if it's authentic. And we look for certain pieces to the puzzle using computer vision and OCR to determine if it's authentic or if it's a counterfeit good.
What's OCR?
Sorry, optical character recognition. So you're looking at like text spacing. So what can happen a lot, like the brand tag label is something you look at. A counterfeit product might have it in a different type of font, or it might be structured in a different way or in different sort of typeface. So you're looking at the anomaly between the real product of what we know is real and then this new product that we're reviewing.
Right. I'm interested to understand through the products that come to you through either the app or the Facebook marketplace, how many of them are counterfeit versus authentic?
I would say the Facebook group, it's hard to tell because we didn't really collect the data like we do now. Now we own the data, so we know everything going through the platform. But I've seen every scam there is in the book. There's definitely a few counterfeits that have slipped through. But the problem is a lot of people don't know that they're counterfeit. They may have bought it from a market, bought it off eBay, or got scammed by someone else. So naturally they don't know. So it's always a bit of a surprise when we do tell them, unfortunately, we can't identify your product. But now on the marketplace, we have a lot of strict processes and models that Lauren has built that we have in place now that detect anomalies and like certain things that go wrong with products. So now we're able to determine what's real, what's not.
We've only ever had a couple of issues in our marketplace, but it is because we've been able to leverage AI and rebuild our processes. But in market in general, you'll have at least 10% of products that are counterfeit, where people are selling something as an authentic good, and more often than not, they don't know it's counterfeit. They're trying to do the right thing. Maybe they purchased it from Facebook Marketplace and they're just on selling it. But we've been quite lucky with our marketplace just because of the processes and the AI we've used.
It's giving Antique Roadshow. Have you seen it? You know,
love
they
it.
show
I
up
love
and they're
it.
like,
I
I'm
love
pretty
that
sure this is
show.
worth £10,000. And they're like, actually, it's worth $0. This is counterfeit. This is what I'm imagining it's like.
Yeah, and we also get the opposite as well. Like someone might go through a divorce and be selling, you know, their husband's watches, or perhaps they found something at a market and they just don't really truly know the value until they sort of list it on the platform, and then they start getting messages or people ask us more information about it, or we might actually message them as well because the price might be a little bit low. So we try to keep tabs on everything just to make sure that, like, if someone uploads a Chanel bag for $100, you know, we can't say it's counterfeit or, you know, not from that, but like we always like to dig a little deeper.
It's a little suspicious at that stage. So that's fair. Absolutely fair enough. So from building this AI technology to understand what's authentic and what's counterfeit, what problems have you seen come up? I mean, either of you, have you come from that specific tech background before or not really?
Yeah, so my background's tech. So I studied physics at uni, then I've been in data science AI ever since. So my bread and butter is building models like this in the banking space. So I was at Macquarie Bank before we started this. Love coding every single day. It's been really interesting to implement the models that I built before in a different situation with this marketplace, because different type of fraud, and that's my background, fraud data science. What happens more often than not is you need to have the right data points to actually authenticate. So someone might take a blurry image, or they'll use a stock image from online, and you cannot determine if that is actually a product that they have in their hand or is counterfeit or authentic via those images. So the first step is your pre-processing stage, which is when you're making sure, one, they've given you the right number of images that you can even use to determine if it's counterfeit or authentic, and then two, those images can be viable through the model.
Right. So the app has been going for a year now. What have been the biggest challenges that you've seen since launching the app versus the Facebook Marketplace?
On a tech side, I would say building something that's custom built. So usually you can use Shopify or something like that with a marketplace, or not a marketplace, sorry, with Shopify. And it's quite easy to add in different options like payments and things like that. But everything that we do is custom build, which is a good and bad thing. A good thing because it means that we've got the freedom to essentially scale our platform how we see fit. We're not restrained by anyone else's technology. But the bad side of that is that it takes a lot longer to actually get to market.
Right.
I would agree. Like from a tech perspective as well, not being able to just plug in a certain feature like you can do on Shopify. So for instance, chat, which we are implementing soon, it's like maybe a 1 month or 2 month build and quite a lengthy project. It's not just something that we can add in, which really like affects our customers and just like the speed to which we build. So we really just have to figure out what our customers want and make sure we're building for those things first.
Right. So how do you address that voice of customer essentially to build out new features and give them what they want to see on the app?
We're so lucky because we have the Facebook group and people just outright tell us what they like and what they don't like. And we're so appreciative of that because not everyone has the luxury of having 100,000 plus customers where they can just say, hey guys, like, what do you value? What do you want us to build? What do you like? I've been calling people actually today, asking our customers, you know, how are you enjoying the app? What do you like? What don't you like? Do you have any feedback? And we collected a lot of data today about specific features that we were planning to build, but it was always really nice to hear their feedback.
I would say it's a combination of using the data so you can see how people are actually engaging the platform, what's stopping them to actually either buy something or sell something, and then overlaying that with different focus groups with the customers and speaking to them directly to understand what their pain point is with the marketplace.
Okay. And what's been the conversion rate from people coming from the Facebook group versus coming onto the app now? And what was your strategy to get them across?
From the Facebook group, we literally just spammed it and told people we're building something. Because when we first initially started, or before we started building, we did a survey and we really wanted to gather as much information as possible, because what I think people want, maybe that's not actually what we should be building for. So I think we had 1,000 or 2,000 peak customers that we asked. And now we just ask the Facebook group and ask our customers and just speak to them every day.
So we've transitioned about 40% to date. We're really lucky. We've got a great organic marketing strategy, leveraging both the Facebook group, but also implementing community with what High End is today, which is really the core of what the Facebook group was about 10 years ago. So every time we do a marketing activation, we're speaking to friends of the brand. We're also speaking to customers. We're making sure that they feel seen and heard. And that's really helped with our organic uplift for acquisition.
Right. And in terms of customer retention on the app, how is that faring from a numbers standpoint?
We have a 40% repeat buyer rate, which is quite high for this industry. So we know that once we get a customer, we've done a good job to keep them within our ecosystem and come back. We've also got a high average order value of about $650. So we're much higher above your Depop's and your marketplaces and those sort of platforms. So once you get someone into your ecosystem, we know how to actually convert them and keep them there.
What would you say your main differences are between another app such as Depop?
From a product perspective, like everyone will shop everywhere. I mean, we do it as well. But what makes us different, and that's really unique, is we have a lot of trust in our processes. So we monitor everything from as soon as someone signs up to the app to the end product. For instance, if you sell something on the app, you put the tracking number in once you send it, and we track that, hold the funds in escrow, and we don't actually release the funds until the buyer's happy and haven't made any complaints. And we also have a really great curation of products as well on our platform.
I would say the fraud and the community component. So a Depop, for example, they don't authenticate their goods. We authenticate absolutely everything. So if you receive something and you think it's suspicious, then we're also there to review it, understand if you need a refund or something like that. And also on the community side, we're not a faceless brand. We are Australia to Australia only. We want to keep it localized because you feel like you trust the platform, you know everyone within it. It's not a global model like a Depop model.
Right. So when you're looking at your community as a whole, what's the demographic that you're kind of targeting at this stage?
We're really targeting your Gen Z and millennials, but we have really all types of age groups that are using our platform. So we try to cater for like a mix, but it's really Gen Z and millennial that we do target.
And it depends on your product. So you have your Gen Xs that will more be buying your more expensive handbags, your Chanels, things like that. Whereas your Gen Zs, they buy and sell a lot more in your clothing or jewelry category.
Right, okay. So at this stage, how many transactions have gone through the app?
That's a Lauren question.
I don't know off the top of my head. We've sold $500,000 worth of goods in the first year. So we're considering there's always tech issues when you launch. We've done really well, I think, so far with 40% of the acquisition and selling $500,000. So proud of that.
That's incredible. And then from a business standpoint, and what's your main revenue drivers? Is it commission based off sales? Are you thinking about adding other revenue streams such as advertising? What's the main strategy around that?
So we make money on commission, and it's a tiered commission structure. So the more expensive the item, the cheaper the commission is. So we don't want to deter customers from selling the more expensive items like a Chanel or a Rolex because of how much some of these platforms charge or consignment businesses charge. And I think that also reflects into our high AOV for each order and transaction. We plan to monetize in other ways with the AI and introducing a B2B component so we can really enable the resale industry to scale.
Okay, so would you white label that technology for other platforms?
Yes.
Interesting.
So that's our plan for this year. So our global play is really plugging into those marketplaces like your eBay, the RealReal, Vestiaire, where you're allowing them and consignment businesses to scale without increasing the risk. Because the biggest issue in our industry is authentication. It costs a lot operationally, and it also creates distrust with the buyer, and they may not come back to your platform. And there's other components that you need to grow as a consignment business or a marketplace, like understanding the condition of an item or understanding the pricing of an item, like you were saying, knowing what the accurate pricing is.
And
it's optimal for sale.
It's really interesting because back in the day when I got scammed buying my first handbag, there wasn't that many counterfeits around, and it's a very new problem. Chanel, Louis Vuitton, Gucci, all of these brands have been counterfeited, but now we're actually seeing brands like Australian brands like Zimmerman, Alame, Christopher Esber, so many other brands globally that are being counterfeited, and brands don't really know what to do about it. And there's actually not that many authenticators in the world too. So it becomes a really big problem for businesses to scale because there's not many of me. And even we get it wrong sometimes. And that's why we really wanted to build something very robust that all businesses could integrate into their systems.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think when you go to Bali and you see brands like Mimco for sobbing out loud, you know?
We were just discussing this.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Hey, you don't think that they're that big a brand that they're going to have knockoffs of, but it's everywhere.
Yeah, your middle market is so high frequency in your counterfeit play. Like when you do think about counterfeits, it's like your Rolex or your Hermes handbags, and you can still sell a counterfeit for $5,000 plus in that market, and they're very good replicas. Whereas your middle market, that's where people are buying and selling every single day in the counterfeit space, which is where really the bulk of the problem is for the market.
For sure. So obviously it started with you, Brooke, then Lauren, you've come into the business. How big is the team at this stage?
We're slim, we're four. We are not growing until we absolutely have to. So being in a startup, you need to be able to be agile and move quickly. And it's also difficult to find the right people for your team. So we're not scaling up until we actually need to, or we're scaling to, say, the US.
Great. So at this stage, you guys are raising capital. How's that going? And are there any specific challenges you found in being female founders?
Good question. The capital raise is going really well. We've had really good feedback. And I think one key point to that is that there's not really a solution in market for what we're building. And also the problem is a growing problem year on year. So it's something that globally it's impacted, not just Australia wide. And that's from both an investor perspective and also business perspective. We've got quite a few businesses, consignment businesses on our marketplace that we've spoken to. They've signed EOIs. They said they want this technology inbuilt into their platform basically so they can move quicker and save money. Female raising has been interesting. There's some really incredible supporting networks out there, I would say, if you speak to the right people, but you do have to sort of dig around and ask for the right connections. And once you're in that space, I've found that there's a lot of doors that you can open, but you're definitely in a different playing field.
Yeah, sometimes you will have a very similar business model or idea, and a male will speak to a VC or, you know, an angel investor, and they'll treat them very differently to a female. I feel like sometimes people doubt the tech side, and that's Lauren's bread and butter, as she says.
Yeah, I would say that's something that has happened where people doubt what, from two perspectives, ability to build, but then also the problem in market. There still is a lot of unconscious bias, but I think a lot of it is unconscious. It's not something that people are sort of purposely trying to do. But again, we've had a lot of supporters out there. We've got a lot of male investors, and our chairman has been a great supporter of ours as well.
Great. What are the main questions that you face when you're trying to get investment from VCs?
I would say market sizing, because this problem isn't something that they've felt themselves. So typically males aren't in the resale space. They might be purchasing drones or some technology secondhand, but they're not necessarily in the market for a secondhand handbag or dress. So that's the first hurdle, getting them to understand or helping them to understand how big this problem is and how fast it's growing in the industry, because it's not something that typically affects them directly. The second side of it is probably educating on the technology side and the ability of AI. In Australia, sometimes we're a little bit further behind than, say, the US, where AI is used every second day on everything. So I think it's also educating on the importance of AI and why this is the right solution for this problem.
People sometimes say, well, can't AI just solve the problem? And I'm like, that's not really how AI works. We get that question quite a lot.
It's an interesting one, I think, what you were saying around men not knowing that this problem exists to be solved and having to educate them on that. Once you do educate them around the industry and how big it actually can be from a business perspective, does that change their view of it and, you know, whether they want to get involved or not?
For sure. I feel like once they understand, a lot of people don't even know that resale's a very new industry, and then counterfeits thrown into the resale industry. It can be quite confusing. And as soon as we do explain the issues and how massive the problem is, they really start to see it from everyone's perspective, the brand's perspective, marketplace perspective, and then they start to see the big picture that we're solving, I guess.
And what helps is also the fact that a lot of brands, whether you're in fashion or you're not in fashion, are focusing on ESG and sustainability, and everyone's trying to understand how they can get, you know, carbon emission net zero. So once you have conversations sort of from a global perspective rather than just industry Australia side perspective, we've really been able to break through those conversations.
Yeah, I think it's interesting the concerns that you're addressing as a business. It's not just, people don't have enough money to spend on these items. It's the circular economy and keeping things out of landfill at the end of the day, which I think is a really positive impact. What's your main mission and how do you ensure that you're sticking to that goal?
It is hard because there's so many things that we just naturally fall into, like sustainability, but we want to be the global leader in authentication.
Okay.
Our goal is to help the industry grow, really, because resale is going to be bigger than retail, but just by your pure economics of how many products are in the space quite soon. And you'll see a lot of retailers, or they already are trying to dabble in resale. They're just not quite sure how to do it. So where we see ourselves playing is being the global authentication leader, but also the enabler for resale to scale internationally.
So in the last few years, luxury and high-end items have increased in value quite significantly. Why do you think that is, and how do you think that affects the resale market?
It's an interesting space because it depends what products you're talking about. If you talk about a Hermes Kelly or Birkin or a Chanel flap, for example, it's almost better buying a handbag than it is the stock market. But there are certain items that don't retain their value depending on style, color, what's happening in season. But I think people do appreciate those sort of items and they are starting to see the value in them. It's because the brands are just hiking up the prices. So in their head, if I bought a Chanel flap 6 years ago for $8,000, that might be $15,000 in the store now, which is absolutely wild. Some brands increase 4 to 6 times per year, depending on the scarcity of the item. And I think that's really driving up value for these items because people can't afford to go and buy a $14,000 bag, or not everyone can.
No,
so they're looking on
as a poor person, I cannot do that.
Yeah, same. But some people, they buy the product for $8,000 and then a few years later they realize it is worth $14,000 and then they list it for that price. So it is a really interesting space of what people perceive their items value because it is really just what they set it as.
Is that a space you're looking to tap into, is kind of education on investment pieces, luxury investment pieces, and how people can get into that rather than, volatile markets such as crypto?
Well, we do. I like crypto.
I've hit a nerve.
We do a lot of educational pieces on our social media and through our email marketing, just so they know what they're buying. You can actually invest in these pieces, or even just resell in general. There's so many pieces on our platform that are brand new with tags. So it's at least 50% off retail price. So instead of even buying a dress for $300, you can get it for $150. It is in the same condition. You'll still be able to resell it for another value, a year down the line if you want to. So it's more about educating our customers that these products are liquid capital rather than something that you're using once and you're just handing it down to someone or you're getting rid of it. You can actually resell it for value.
And people do need to be educated. Like, no one understands how many good pieces there are on the resale market. People think high-end luxury pieces. We found pieces up to 80% off on our site before and brand new with tags. There's been some gems.
Yeah, it's very dangerous to look every
day. So educational content's really important for us because we do want to educate anyone who's following us to show them what you can resell for, what you can buy, and the types of products. We do a lot of brand, price. We do a lot of data insights as well, which people find really interesting.
How are you keeping the data for your customers secure on the platform?
So we use AWS cloud system and everything's we've actually worked with AWS to make sure that everything is secure and nothing can be hacked. So there's certain ways that we structure the data and our keys, your private keys, your public keys, things like that, of what we allow and don't allow. From a financial perspective, we use Stripe as our payment base. Everything is housed financially in Stripe. We purge any financial data. We don't hold any of that. So then the customers are safe from that perspective as well.
And in terms of data around, consumer trends, what kind of statistics are you gathering from your customer base?
We're looking to understand how frequently they're shopping, what they're listing, what also retains the value, because certain products retain more value. Sometimes things are very trend driven. It's very cyclical in the e-com space. now it's an event season, so everyone's looking for a dress for a wedding or for Christmas, and then in winter you might be looking for a new handbag for work. So understanding that we're providing the right supply-demand ratio at the right time of year, and it's also allowing us to then educate our customers. Like if you want to clear out your wardrobe, we can send out comms maybe in March to say, hey, everyone's looking for a new coat or looking for a new handbag, so now's the time to list these products if you are looking to clear your wardrobe out.
Right.
The data part is the most exciting because on the Facebook group, we didn't have access to this data. We could scrape some of it, but it wasn't our data, so we didn't know for sure. So now that we do have an app and we do own the product, we can see now handbags are our most popular products, the most popular brands, types of products, everything. So it's like amazing. And then we can, as Lauren was saying, we can like email our suppliers and say, hey, we need more bags on the platform, or other businesses, or we need more size 8 because we've got too many 10s and things like that.
Is that another part of your strategy in terms of another revenue stream that you could be selling these data insights?
We could be to brands. So something that we've spoken about that we won't be unlocking initially would be working with brands like a Zimmerman or an Alame on the counterfeit side. So something that they struggle with is brand protection on the IP side with counterfeits, because that's a blind spot for them. So they're unaware of what's being counterfeited on the secondhand market, how quickly it's being counterfeited, and also the popularity of an item. So we can share insights back with them to say, okay, this dress 2 weeks after it went onto the floor was counterfeited on this site. We saw it come through. You might need to better, introduce IP in your prints and things like that. So it helps them really retain their brand protection and value.
That's fascinating. So you're kind of increasing the value of a brand that's not really even associated with you. You're helping them to recognize what could, really protect them in the long term.
Exactly. And it's not just the counterfeit sort of data, it's also the resale data. Maybe we can provide information on how many pieces are on the resale market, what's performing best on the resale market. So maybe when they start planning their next collection or one after, they can say, maybe we don't do this print because it wasn't so popular. So that can really help improve their revenue as well.
And inventory planning and supply. So make sure they don't oversupply some of the stock that might not sell.
Right. I mean, oversupply is a massive problem. You see all over social media, people dumpster diving and finding bags that have been chopped up. I used to work at Ralph Lauren in another lifetime, and that was a thing. If something got damaged on the shop floor, it got destroyed. And it's becoming more obvious and apparent to the consumer that that's something that is happening. Can you explain why that happens and how your kind of technology could probably slow down that effect?
I think resale gives brands an alternative. So historically, they didn't have too much of an alternative except to send it to an outlet or heavily discount the product. And there are brands that are your higher value brands that didn't want to discount because they thought it was damaging to their brand. So they might do something illegal for a tax component or something like that, where they would cut the product or burn the product so no one can actually have it, but they don't actually lose their revenue from that. They can still claim that back from a tax perspective, which is not a fun thing to think about.
Yeah.
But the resale market enables them to open up a new revenue stream without having to put these bags to landfill. And it's also actually increasing their ability to tap into a new customer base. Because what happens more often than not, I might be able to, not that I have, but I could buy a secondhand Chanel handbag from our platform, but I can't afford that retail. But if I can buy that on the resale perspective, maybe I then eventually save up in a few years' time to buy it from retail. So you're tapping into a new type of customer that you wouldn't have actually had reach to previously.
Yeah, and I think it was quite taboo, resale, for many years. A lot of brands didn't want to be associated with it, but now they're starting to come around to it, and they're also being forced by consumers and their customers because they want them to play in that space. They want them to be... I've just gone blank.
Don't worry, I can edit this bit out. You're fine.
What was I going to say? Yeah, I've had a day.
I think you're just going to talk about the fact that customers are demanding ESG and sustainability and responsibility now. So for these brands to play in this space, they need to do something. It might not necessarily be partnering with a resale company, but they need to be showing that they are recycling their products, or they've got an upselling program where I can give my handbag back to them and get a voucher in store. So you're keeping your customer in circularity, and it's not just a one-way transaction.
I know a company actually that raised capital on Virtual Elf, the label. They do that with their bags. So they also have a program where if you're finished with a bag, you can send it to them and they'll give it to somebody in need, which I think is a really beautiful program.
I love that. And something important to mention as well, governments are really stepping in now and making sure that brands are doing the right thing and putting certain taxes on products being made so that they don't overproduce their products. And I think that's really nice that people are starting to repair their products now. I know a lot of brands are offering that as well, where if something breaks, I know Nudie Jeans does something like that as well, where if any problems happen with your jeans, take them back and they'll repair them or take them up and things like that. So I think it's really important for the industry to follow.
Absolutely. So obviously you're raising capital at the moment. What are you raising capital to achieve? You want to obviously continue to grow sustainably and organically, but you need that capital injection to really shoot up. What's the use of funds at the moment?
So the use of funds is to take the B2B AI component to market. So we plan to launch that next year with businesses that are on our platform and also other businesses that we've already had conversations with and they've already signed on to say that they want it embedded. We'll test it here in Australia and then we'll start seeding into the US because that's where the massive market is for the resale space.
Right. And so how much capital is that going to take?
We estimate it'll take about $500,000, again, sticking to a streamlined team. So we'll use that to hire a developer in-house and a marketer to take it to market and sell it to these brands and also foster those relationships. Once it goes live, we'll have a 3-month incubation period with about 20 brands that we can test and learn, see what's working, what's not working. And then that's when we can scale it out to the market from there.
Huge. So obviously the app's only been going for a year now. What would you say is the biggest mistake that you've made and what have you learned?
Which one?
How much time do we have? There's always mistakes in the startup world. Fail fast.
Fail fast, we always like to say. So we don't see it as a curse when, someone does something wrong. We just pivot quickly. I'd say finding enough time to find the right people, because having a startup, it is really hard to find the right people because they have to love it as much as you do. And it's also just a very different dynamic than just getting a normal 9 to 5. You wear many hats.
I think spending your time and your money in the right way. It's very easy to make mistakes or get caught up in the little things, but we need to make sure us as founders and whoever we've employed that they're spending their time on the big things that are actually going to have impact and matter at the end of the day, and that we're investing in the right spaces and make sense for us as a startup now. Because what makes sense for us in 12 months' time isn't what we should be investing in now.
Right. Between the two of you, obviously you work together every single day. What do you think complements each other in the best way?
We're polar opposites.
Yeah, we're literally the opposite, so it's good. Our strength and weaknesses balance really, really well. So Brooke's much more of the creative sides. Anything when we have a brand activation or something in market that is all Brooke's creativity coming to the place, you probably do not want me designing that because it wouldn't look very good. And then on the other side, it's like the technical side. So I'm very logical. Anything where we're building models or we're speaking to investors or numbers, that's my sort of go-to, and Brooke's is definitely the creative side.
And it's really interesting because sometimes we'll just be having a conversation about perhaps something that we should or shouldn't do. And because I think in a different way than Lauren does, we come to a different conclusion in the end. And sometimes she makes me think about what I'm doing and vice versa. So it's a really nice compliment.
Being able to challenge each other in the right ways, I think, is the biggest benefit.
Huge. And then when you're thinking about growing your community, what's your marketing strategy? You've mentioned brand activations. So are you doing a combination of digital advertising, out of home marketing? What's the strategy there?
I feel like there's 2 key things that we like to play heavily in. One is partnering with brands that our customers already love. So we're getting into new audiences, the right audiences, but also providing benefit back to our customers at the end of the day. And the second part to that is running community activations. So we're at Fashion Week earlier this year. We'll go again next year, just running events with our customers, speaking to them every single day and making them feel like that they're a part of a brand, not so much that we're a faceless brand that they don't know high-end.
Right.
And I think our community makes us who we are. If we didn't have our Facebook group, and that's where we began, we think it's so important to make them feel a part of it because we wouldn't be here without them. So
yeah, absolutely. It feels like voice of customer is at the very core of everything that you do. And I'm sure that having new shareholders on board will really shape the future for high end. How important is it then to have shareholders on board that actually are part of that community?
I think very important. If you don't have the right shareholders on board or the right people on your cap table, it can make or break your company. So at the end of the day, they are purchasing a part of the company. It's not just Brooke and I then at the end of the day. And your community is everything. They can help you grow. They can also help you make the right decisions, like when we're talking about what use cases we want to solve for next on the platform. So really making sure that they're the right target market for what we're building and they will help us get to that next stage is really vital for us.
So for other female founders who are starting a business and don't really know where to go from, what advice would you give them?
Network and test and learn. I would do as much as you can before you go for investment, bootstrap, make sure that you're actually testing that it's a problem that's worth solving before diving into that whole space. And I would speak to absolutely everyone possible. Cold call people, DM everyone on LinkedIn, speak to founders. Everyone is more than likely willing to help and have a conversation because that will actually get you to the point where you need to be, where you are then ready to raise capital and actually launch your business.
I think it's really lonely, especially for females who may not have the confidence because just naturally we think maybe we're not good enough. I think it's so important to just start reaching out to people. Maybe it's a friend, community, maybe it's like, as Lauren says, LinkedIn, because it's really surprised me. There's so many people that are so willing to connect, to meet you, to become your mentors or just have a chat, and you just never know where that'll take you. And I wish we did it a lot sooner.
Brilliant. Thank you guys so much for coming on and having a chat with me. I think from somebody who has been part of the Facebook group for a really long time, it was fascinating to see how you've taken that community and actually monetized it and created a really solid foundational business. So congratulations to that. And I really can't wait to see what you achieve with the cap raise. Good luck to you.
Thank you so much.